Good morning. Is everybody used to daylight savings time yet? That was fun. I missed the last meeting because I was in Arizona. My daughter plays cello, and she's at the University of Arizona getting her doctorate degree. And so she had a performance out there. So my wife and I went out for the performance. So it was a good trip. So I got to do a few other fun things out there, but it was good to get out there. Does anybody have any business? Any things we need to talk about? Harold, how are we doing on dues? Are we still? Okay. Okay.
38, I think. 38, 39.
Okay.
I think 38 is one itself.
Okay. The other issue we have is that we still need to do programs. So anybody willing to look into doing programs? Or do you have any ideas of programs that you could do? You know, it'd be nice to have somebody set up to do some of the programs. I know we had talked in the past about even showing some videos, training videos from the internet, or videos about different aspects of photography, which I think is a good thing to do, but I think we need to plan that ahead. Anybody want to take a look at that and look for something to try next month? Maybe a couple of 30-minute videos on photography that would be of interest? Okay. Here's Sue. Okay, so let me see. I need to share my screen here. Kim, could you give me a hand? I'm trying to figure out how to just get this shared. I'm on Zoom.
Hit span it, then right there.
Right here, share.
And then hit share.
Okay. And so
Now we see it's from.
okay. How's that look? Oh, that's not what I want to show. Okay. 2 weeks ago, my wife and I took a trip to Costa Rica, which was really quite nice. Who else has been to Costa Rica? Quite a few. This was a Rhodes Scholar trip. And I've done Rhodes Scholar trips before. I did 2 photography trips with them in the past, back in the pre-pandemic days. They had one out in Chincoteague, and they had one in the Great Smoky Mountains. And they were both good. The thing that was good about them is that we had a guide who was very well versed in where we were going and what we were going to see, and had access to get to places that we wouldn't have had access to otherwise. In the Great Smokies, we went into a place for a sunrise that didn't open until 9 in the morning, but we were able to get in there at 6 o'clock and go into a nice place for sunrises. And knew where to go and what to do. And that was very, very helpful because trying to go out there without knowing anything ahead of time can be a real challenge. So we saw this come up and we saw that it was going to be digital photography and also a lot of birding. And my wife's getting into birding now. So we thought this might be a fun thing to do. So we set up to do this trip. And they handled everything. We flew into San Jose and we stayed at the Radisson by the airport. But the next morning, there were 8 of us on the tour. 2 of them were birders, 6 of them were photographers. And we had a guide and a bus driver. And we had a bus big enough for 20 people. So we had plenty of room. It was very spacious. And we took off. We were heading out to our first location. And we stopped along the way. There's a waterfall that's pretty much a tourist attraction along the road. So we stopped there. And next to it was they had fruit stands and they were selling things. This is called a guanabana, which is a fruit that they make a juice out of, which they call sour sop. I don't know why it's called sour sop. It was actually a nice fruit juice, but it was very good. So we stopped and we got some pictures of the waterfall and then continued on. Along our way, we stopped for lunch at a restaurant. And the restaurant we stopped at had a balcony out back, and they put out food for birds. So there's a lot of birders standing on the balcony photographing the birds. And then after we photographed, we had lunch there. And I think the sign there says that if you're not eating lunch, you have to pay a certain amount to be able to stand there and photograph birds. But we did have lunch there, and we ate at several places like this. And this was down at a low altitude in the rainforest. And so we saw a lot of birds there. We saw an emerald toucanet. That was a pretty neat little bird. Came by to eat the fruit. Saw a lot of pictures of him. We saw a silver-throated tanager and a clay-colored tanager. The clay-colored tanager is the national bird of Costa Rica because it's the first bird that people hear in the morning. It's up early, and you hear that, and you know it's morning. But it is the official bird of Costa Rica. We saw a buff-throated saltator, I think that's what it is, and a Baltimore oriole. I didn't expect to see Baltimore orioles, but there they were. That was a pretty cool thing. A blue and gray tanager and a steely-vented hummingbird. My wife picked up, I think, 85 new birds for her list on this trip. 15 of them were hummingbirds. A lot of hummingbirds down there. And it was nice. It posed for us and sat there very nicely. 100 to 400 millimeter our telephoto. And some of these are cropped pretty well, but it worked well for what we were doing. Steely-vented hummingbird there. And then after we left and we were heading to our next stop, we stopped on the roadside because there was a whole pack of these white-nosed coatis. And they're pretty neat. They hunt vipers. So they will eat snakes, vipers, which is nice of them because we did encounter a viper. We took some photographs of it, but they're venomous, so we try to avoid them. So then we went on to a river cruise on the Sarapiqui River. And we got into a flatboat and we went down the river for a couple of hours and we're photographing things along the way. One of the things we found were some howler monkeys up in the trees. They were pretty cool. And then these mangrove swallows were everywhere. They're always flitting around the boat and zipping along right along the surface of the water, looking to pick up insects and so forth. But they were very fast, very, very fast-moving birds. Looking up, we saw a green iguana up in a tree. And then as we were coming along, there was a log next to the water. And our guide pointed out these long-nosed bats just sitting there on this log. And we saw a lot of bats in the daytime while we were there. They were just kind of hanging out places. And I accused him of, basically putting stuffed bats on this log just to. As we went along, we saw a green ibis. So it wasn't even ripe. We saw a bare-throated tiger heron, which is a pretty neat looking bird. Yeah, those are there's shadows on it, as well as you can see some striping on the front of it. But these here are shadows from I couldn't get a cleaner picture. A little green kingfisher. There were several kingfishers that we saw along the way. But it was a pretty small bird. And then we went to our next location, which was the Selva Verde Lodge, which is really nice in the rainforest, balconies. And this also, the restaurant here, we ate several meals there. Breakfast started at 7 o'clock, and we would go out at 6 o'clock on the back balcony behind the restaurant, and birds would come, and we would photograph birds out there on that balcony as well, which at first was a challenge because it was pretty dark at 6 o'clock in the morning. But as it got lighter, we were able to get a lot of birds to photograph. A little kiskadee. We saw quite a few of those. Clay-colored tanager again. A scarlet rump tanager. That was a pretty bird. We saw that quite a few times. This was an interesting one. A red-legged honey creeper. It looks sort of like a hummingbird, but it doesn't feed like a hummingbird. It stops and eats, but it doesn't fly while it eats. But it was an interesting looking bird and pretty small. Then we saw this Montezuma oropendula. This is a fairly big bird, and it makes these nests, these big nests that it weaves up high in the trees. And we usually make multiple nests, so some of them are decoys. And there's one flying by his nest there. But you'd see these big nests hanging in trees. And they were pretty neat. And then we saw toucans. And the reasons that the toucans have those long curved bills is because they eat the eggs and the young of the oropendula. They can basically reach down into the nest and get to the young. And so we saw 3 different types of toucans. The black mandibled toucan was the first one. We saw that one a lot. This other one is an aracari toucan. And then we saw a pale-vented pigeon. And then some type of tanager, but I never did get the name of it. We've been trying to figure that out. We bought a bird book, but we just haven't figured out just what this is. It might be a young Baltimore Oriole, but I don't think the beak's quite right. Okay. A russet-naped wood rail. Don't run into those all that often. And then a crimson-collared tanager. That was a pretty neat bird. And then, because we had a guide, and we were at a guy's house where we had been setting up photographing birds in his backyard, he asked his friend, "Hey, do you know where there's any owls?" He said, "Yeah, I think I do. I think we can find one." So we got back in the bus and went down the road, and we took a walk through the rainforest and came out into a field. And off in the distance was a pair of spectacled owls. They were pretty far away. I couldn't get them with both of their eyes open at the same time. I could get one or the other would have its eyes open, the other one would be closed. But it was off in the distance, and we were able to get this. And while we were walking, looking at the neat stuff going on in the forest, we saw, you've probably seen videos of them, the leafcutter ants. We saw a whole trail of leafcutter ants going across the trail carrying their leaves back to their nest. There were big nests we saw. They were pretty cool. Could have spent some more time with that. But it was really neat. There was a tropical mockingbird, and then there's a kill-billed toucan. Now, our guide kept talking about this kill-billed toucan, And I'm thinking, why did they name a toucan after a Quentin Tarantino movie? Then I finally realized he was calling it a keel-billed toucan, not a kill-bill toucan. But it was a pretty bird, very, very attractive bird. Then we were just driving along to get to our next adventure, and we just stopped because this was a nice scene and some mountains. We were basically between two mountain ranges. There was one mountain range which was volcanic, and another mountain range which was tectonic, and we were basically in a valley between those two mountain ranges. Then we went to a place called Frog's Heaven. These people have a little business where they have frogs and snakes and things, and basically we went there to take photos of them. So guy set up a pole across between two things, brought out some frogs and set them up for us to photograph. So we got a red-eyed tree frog there. So he was a pretty cute little guy. And then there's a poison dart frog, a glass frog. The glass frog looks clear, but when you set it down on a green leaf, it looks green. And then this long snout tree frog, which was pretty cool as well. This was an eyelash palm pit viper. They tried to get it to pose for us, but it didn't want to cooperate very much. But it is a venomous snake, so we had to keep our distance from it. And then a black and green poison dart frog. He was a cute little guy. But the poison dart frogs did not hold still. You know, that red-eyed tree frog, it just kind of sat there. It was mellow. These tree frogs were just bouncing all over the place. You had to shoot really quickly to try to get them. And it was really best to use a telephoto for them, because if you tried to get close enough with a macro lens, they were gone. Then as we were walking through the woods there, they pointed out a hummingbird nest with a white-necked Jacobin hummingbird sitting in it. That's a tiny little bird sitting in that nest. So that was pretty cute. Then as we were driving down the road, you know, we had a very good guide and a very good driver, and they would spot things out the window, and we would stop, pull the bus over, back up or whatever. And one thing we saw was a laughing falcon up on the top of a pole in the distance, and also a three-toed sloth. Now, what the guide told us is that all sloths have three toes, but some sloths have three fingers and some sloths have two fingers, but their feet have three toes. So a three-toed sloth is really a three-fingered sloth, which is something I will never forget, probably. But it was off in the distance. We pulled off the side of a road, and then it was up in the tree off in the distance. So we were able to get photos of it, though. They've got green on them because algae grows on them. And then there's a moth that lives in the algae and eats the algae. And so it's really a combination of a sloth, algae, and a moth. And if it doesn't have the moth, it'll be completely covered with algae, and that's bad for it. So it needs that moth. Then we went to a ranch. A guy has a ranch. He has cattle and horses and other things, but he also has a lot of macaws that come to visit his ranch. And so he feeds them. And so we went to this place. It was a nice location. It had a nice stream there. We took some photos. And then we saw macaws. And what they would do is they would set up feeding stations for the macaws and call to them. And then the macaws would come flying into the feeding stations, and we try to photograph them in flight, which isn't that easy when you've got 8 people lined up all trying to photograph the same macaw. But I managed to get a few along the way. There's a scarlet macaw and a hybrid macaw. The hybrid gets better gas mileage. But they were really interesting birds. And they were very close by. They were up in a stump of a tree and where they put some food. So they were very accessible and easy to photograph. Then What we did not expect was that there was a big tree there full of white-faced capuchin monkeys. And these guys were funny. I mean, they were very curious about us. They came over trying to, get hold of our lenses and our hats and stuff. But they were running around and having a really good time up in this tree. They were really pretty interesting. There was a whole family of them up there. They had a little baby with them. And then you can see this was trying to go after somebody's lens. When they're basically up there and take pictures of it, and it was reaching for the lens. But they were really interesting little monkeys and very playful. They also had some fruit growing on this farm. The one down on the lower end is a breadfruit, and this is the guanabana, which they use to make that juice called soursop, which isn't sour, but it's very good. So we saw that and saw some interesting things there. Then we went back to our hotel that we were staying in and took a walk out from the hotel across the road in order to go to a place with some flowers to photograph. And as we were walking out, one of the people noticed a rufous motmot. Who names these? Do you see that? You ever see a bird that, that looks like it would be a motmot? I don't understand. And it's also a rufous motmot. So, but it's a really interesting bird with the long tail that's, I'm not sure whether it grows that way or the bird actually uses its beak to trim it to get that appearance. It does trim it that way? Huh. Okay, that's interesting, but it's a very, very unique bird. So we got to see the motmot. We also saw a speckled caiman there, and that's another thing. We're walking along this leafy trail. There's a little stream along next to us, and our guide saw it out of the corner of his eye, and we stopped and took photographs of it. And I'm not sure, it might have been a rubber speckled caiman they just put there. But it didn't move while we were there, so I'm not sure. Then the other thing I noticed, we were down in the lowlands and in the rainforest. Trees, you didn't see a tree all by itself. Trees were covered with other vegetation. There were ferns, and these are bromeliads. This tree was full of bromeliads, which don't grow on the ground. They only grow up in trees. And I believe they're basically left there by bird droppings and take off and grow. So every tree we saw was really many trees or many different types of vegetation together. And there were some very interesting types of vines and so forth on the trees, but a lot of bromeliads. And then these are, I think this one on the left is a type of ginger. There are a lot of different gingers. And this, I think, is related to the canna lily, but I'm not sure about these. I haven't gotten around to checking all of the definitions yet on these flowers. A couple more things in that garden that I stopped the photograph. They were pretty cool. This was a spider. It's the rare 5-legged spider. The reason it has 5 legs, if you look up really close, you can see where 3 other legs used to be attached. So it apparently had a run-in with a bird or something else, but it was a pretty cool spider there in the web. And I don't know what this one is. Oops. Yeah, okay. I don't know what this one here is, but it was an interesting looking insect just sitting there. So I photographed that one too. And these are different types of ginger flowers. The one on the left is called shampoo ginger. And if you take a hold of that and squeeze it, the flower, juice comes out of it, which feels and smells like shampoo. It's slick and has a nice aroma to it. And it's actually used in making some shampoos, a shampoo ginger. And this is still opening up, but this will be a torch ginger. And I don't know what this one is, but they were all pretty interesting flowers out there. Okay. Seems to have. Okay. Then again, a couple more types of flowers. I know the bottom one is called a peacock flower. That was pretty cool. I'm not sure what this one up on top was. One on the left here is a shrimp flower. When it gets white blossoms on it, they look like little shrimp coming out. And I'm not sure what the one on the right is, but it was a pretty flower blooming. So we wandered around and did that for a while. And then that was our last day at that particular hotel. So the next day we got back in the bus and we had to drive for several hours to get to our next hotel, which instead of being down in the lowlands was up in the mountains. We went up to about 7,500 feet above sea level to get up into the cloud forest. To get there, though, we had to pass through a couple of towns. And so we stopped to take some. No. But this was in Coronado. This is a cathedral there, which a Gothic cathedral that was built years back, modeled on German Gothic churches. And it was a pretty interesting building. So we stopped there basically for some architecture photography. And very nice church on the inside. So that was an interesting place to stop and take photos of. And I'm glad that I had my really wide angle lens for that. If what? I don't know. I don't know. But it was a very interesting church. So we spent some time there. And these are a couple of buildings across the street from it. This place here sells fish, the fish market. And this across the street was a municipal building for the town of Coronado. And then we took a drive. We continued along our way, and we were on our way to Cartago and just stopped to get some scenery of the mountains in the distance with the clouds rolling in. It was a nice place to stop. Then we went on to Cartago and we went to a basilica. And this basilica was built quite a while ago. Cartago has been the scene of many very bad earthquakes. There were churches that were built in the past that were destroyed by earthquakes. This one has been rebuilt since then. It's the Basilica of the Lady of the Angels. Very, very nice looking building. On the inside, quite an amazing church on the inside. Now, if you look here, you'll see this woman going down the aisle on her knees. That's what they tended to do there in this particular basilica. As they would come into the church, they would get on their knees and go up the aisle. In August, there's a big festival at the church, and people come from miles around, and it's, a long line of people on their knees trying to get into the church. But it's a really beautiful church. And the legend behind the church, called the Lady of the Angels, is that a young girl, many years ago, found this statue in the woods, a carved statue of the Virgin and Child. No idea where it came from, but it became a local icon. And this is in the basement of that church. They built the church around it. And people come, they bring little trinkets, basically when they're asking for, prayers, they bring all these little trinkets. You can see a few of them sitting here around the statue. They've got a whole wall of things they've collected of trinkets that people have brought there for the statue. Kind of interesting. And then we took a walk from there about 6 blocks to the ruins of the church that had been destroyed by the earthquake back in 1910. And so I just took a few photos along the street as I was going along. This looks a lot like Ashland, just, similar. Yeah, but it was interesting seeing just a little bit different. But these are the ruins of the church that we destroyed back in 1910. It had been destroyed a few times before that. And in 1910, they decided they weren't going to rebuild it there, but then they built that basilica, and they used a lot of the block from this church for the foundation of the basilica. And it was interesting. It had all of these wrought iron grills in the windows and doors. And inside, it was taken over by nature. There were a lot of trees and a lot of things growing on the inside of it, but a lot of people go there to visit it. And then there's a square next to it with this big statue that was just put up in 2021, celebrating 200 years of independence for Costa Rica. So that was their 200th anniversary of their independence, and this was in the square next to the ruins. Very popular place. A lot of people visiting it. A lot of pigeons too. Then we went up into the mountains and we stayed at this place. Did you stay there, Pat?
Yes.
Big. Really nice place. Nice lodge, nice rooms, and very well located. And so from there, we went up the first morning. We got out at 6 o'clock to try to find the Quetzal. The resplendent Quetzal is very popular. A lot of people go there just to try to find the Quetzal. And so we got out the first morning, and the male was up here in the tree and the female was down here. Now they were pretty far away, and it was dark and early, and it was not easy getting that shot. And then this one, I got a better shot. The Quetzal with his long tail hanging down. That's the male. And it's because of that tail that it's such a popular bird. And then later on, got another shot of it. And then we saw a tree where the Quetzal, one of the Quetzals lives. As we were going by on the bus, our guide saw the Quetzal tail hanging out of this opening. By the time we got to the bus stop, it had flown away. But I was able to get a photograph of this, the hollow tree that the Quetzal lives in. So, but we did manage to get the Quetzal our first day and didn't see one after that. Then this place had a nursery where they grew and sold succulents and cacti. So we went up there that morning and decided to just do some photography around the flowers and the different succulents. So I took quite a few photos there of the different succulent blossoms. They were pretty cool. I was the only one with a macro lens. Oh, although the guide had a macro lens too, but on the trip of the other people, I'm the only one who had a macro lens. So got some cactus flowers and various cactus and little cactus buds growing and some different flowers. So that was a good, fun thing to do for a while, taking those photos. And this was a cactus, but real close to. A lot of spikes on this one. Pretty neat. So then after that, we went to a place right up the road. Trying to think what the name of it was. Batsu, yeah. Another place where they had set up with birds and hummingbird feeders and so forth. And so we went up there to take photographs and find the different birds. Got a flame-colored tanager, a melodious blackbird, a white-throated mountain gem. I don't know why it's not white-throated, but a scintillant hummingbird. A scintillant hummingbird is very small. A Talamanca hummingbird, we saw a lot of those. Now, the way we were getting these photographs is that they had a lot of hummingbird feeders, so there's a lot of hummingbirds coming around. And then at one point, they take the feeders away and they put flowers out and sprayed them with nectar. So the hummingbirds were very much attracted to these. So basically I had my camera setting on a tripod, focused on the flower, and whenever a hummingbird would come near, there'd brrr, you know, take 10 shots or whatever. And if I was lucky, I would get a couple of nice shots. So that worked out. But they had a really nice background and shooting at a 2,000th of a second. Sometimes I went up to a 4,000th of a second. Was able to try to capture these shots. This is a volcano hummingbird. That was a tiny hummingbird. It was really small. And because it was small, its wings beat faster than the other hummingbirds. So you had to really be careful trying to get photographs of this one because it was moving so fast. Couple more hummingbirds. There's the Talamanca, green violet tear, volcano hummingbird. And we were lucky that they were posing around us in different places. You can find them in the shrubs. Then the next morning, we left our hotel and we went down the road a little ways just to take some photographs of a river that was flowing down there. It was kind of like being in Shenandoah, really, along one of the waterfall streams. The biggest challenge was that it was full sun. In the mornings, it was perfectly clear. The sun would come up, it would be full sun. And then by afternoon, it would cloud over. So being full sun, it was a little bit challenging getting some of these shots. So these shots, I did five shots, exposure bracketed, and then combined them to HDR in Lightroom. Then we were just basically, this was an exercise in moving water photography. So that was enjoyable. Then I was back looking for more woodpeckers. An acorn woodpecker, a green violeteer, a flame-colored tanager, a Hennessy warbler. Saw quite a few of those. A sooty-capped chlorophingus. I don't know who names these things. A large-footed finch, and it really doesn't like you to call it that. And then more hummingbirds hanging out at a feeder. Then had a free afternoon, went into a garden that was right by our hotel room, which was really a little cottage, and just photographing some of the flowers around. There were a lot of tropical flowers to see. There were a lot of these. They have these at the Botanic Gardens too, out at Los Ginter, but there were tons of those there. A lot of succulents as well. Aloe, a bird of paradise plant. We had a lot of good stuff. And then we went to the Mountain of Death. You always wondered, guys, oh yeah, we're going to get in the bus now and go to the Mountain of Death. This was over 11,000 feet above sea level at this point. We were above the tree line. And so we went up there and you could see on a really clear day, which we didn't have, you could actually see both the Pacific Ocean and the Caribbean Sea on different directions. But it was hazy enough that we couldn't really see the water. But on a perfectly clear day, like after it had rained, you'd be able to see that. So we went up there, got some nice photos of that. And this was as the morning was coming on, the clouds are coming up again. But we had been down under those clouds before we left. So we drove up to this place and we went probably 3,000 to 4,000 feet up from where we had been staying to get to this point. Yes. Yeah, because we were walking around, walking some trails to find places. And it was tough. You didn't want to try to run or anything. Yeah, the air was very thin. So, but that was the highest point we got to. And then from there, we went to another place to have lunch and photograph some more birds. They had a lot of hummingbirds. Fiery throated hummingbird was one that we were looking for. The Talamanca hummingbirds. And this is my favorite photo I got. That's just a lucky shot. I got that hummingbird at that angle was really very fortunate to get that shot. And then after that, we headed back down into San Jose to our hotel. And had a nice dinner and our guide had put together a presentation. Everybody in the group gave him 15 to 20 of our favorite photos from the trip. And he had a presentation put together for everybody. And we had a nice dinner with him. And then the next morning we all left, which was good. So I will say, I do find the Road Scholar trips that I've been on were really well organized. They had everything from airfare, hotels, all of our meals were included in this particular trip. Everything was done perfectly. The worst part of the trip was we flew back on a Sunday and we didn't get into Richmond until after midnight. But we landed in Miami, go through customs, wasn't a big deal. Okay, let's go get a good meal. So we're walking through the concourse and there's a Don Shula's Bar and Grill. Like, oh, we ought to be able to get some food in here. Worst place. First of all, they've got this QR code on the table that you have to scan to come up with the menu. Except that there were two QR codes. One of them was for something that was trying to sign you up for a bunch of things online. So if you hit the wrong QR code, you got pulled into all of this crap. So I got out of that, got back to the menu, but at the bottom, as you're going through the menu on your phone, there's this thing that says continue. If you hit continue, it takes you back to that other stuff. I got so frustrated by the time we finally got our food ordered. The guy came over, we each got a cheeseburger with fries and a bottle of sparkling water. With the required 18% gratuity, it was $83. It was overcooked and dry. And it was just like, oh, never again. So, welcome to Miami. So, other than that, that's all I have for now. Pardon? It was 9 days, 2 travel days and 7 days in country. And we were going from 6 in the morning until 8 at night. We'd have dinner typically at 7. But breakfast would be at 7, but we would often get out before breakfast in order to take photographs. We had places to go every day. It was very well organized and, he knew where he wanted to go and what we wanted to see. And we were also fortunate to see things that weren't on the itinerary. Like seeing the sloths and seeing some of the things we just happened to stop for was very good. And he was very knowledgeable, knew all of the birds, knew all of the animals, and it was a very well done trip. And I would go back. Yes, Pat. Yes.
Any instruction on editing or anything like that?
He gave a short presentation on editing. Just a quick overview on Lightroom for people. Most of it was on how to take the photographs, not as much on editing. But it was helpful because he used to be a Nikon person, and recently Canon approached him and gave him a Canon R5 to use. So he's familiar with the Nikons as well as a Canon, so he was able to help people with their settings on both. I mean, the problem that I've had is if I've done a workshop and somebody has a Nikon, that's set up so totally differently. I struggle with it. But he was very helpful with people with all of their different things. And he also has his own company doing things. So he basically hires out to Road Scholar, but he also does other independent tours. So I would highly recommend the guy. He was very good. Yes, Bill?
In your hummingbird setup.
Yeah.
What type of, you said you sprayed the nectar onto the.
Well, the same nectar you would use in the hummingbird feeders. So and it was funny, at the one place, they took the hummingbird feeder away and put it in a sink. And hummingbirds kept flying down into the sink to get the nectar.
I mean, basically sugar and water.
Sugar water, yeah. And as I learned, what you do in order to keep it fresher, you put in a micronutrient dosage of copper, which keeps the nectar from going bad. So you can buy the nectar, basically sugar with copper in it, or you can buy the copper additive. You can just put in your own sugar water. So, yes, Bill. 4. I took my 100 to 400 millimeter telephoto, which I knew that I would use, and I use that most often. I took my 24 to 105 as just a walking around lens, and that was helpful as well. I took my macro lens because I knew that we were going to find flowers and things. And I also took my 16 to 35 millimeter, which was really helpful in the churches. That's the only place I really needed it. But getting into the churches inside a building like that, that really came in handy. 100 millimeter. Yeah. But I've had that for over 10 years and it's been a great lens. Anything else? Thank you. MJ? We did not encounter mosquitoes. We did take mosquito repellent. We took insect repellent. Did not really encounter many at all. Now, maybe in the summer months when it's the rainy season, it's probably worse. But this time of year, we didn't really encounter much of anything like that. I don't think any of us got any bug bites, but we were using repellent. We didn't get any shots. I heard of somebody in the group took out an anti-malarial pill, but I didn't feel that we really needed that. And they didn't suggest it, so we just went as we did. 2 weeks ago. Yeah, we came back, flew home on March 2nd. Yes. Yes, I took my laptop and every day I would go through and do a quick edit on my photos. I took 6,200 photos. Now, I took a lot of duplicates. I also, if I was doing, for example, I probably did at least 40 focus stacking photographs. Well, focus stacking is 20 shots at a time. So that's 800 photos right there to end up with one image. When we were doing the hummingbirds, it was often 10, 15 shots at a time, and maybe 2 or 3 of them would have a hummingbird in a good location. So there was a lot of that. I ended up taking down from 6,200 to about 1,100, 1,200 photos. And this, I probably used 200 photos altogether with this. So yeah, but every day I did go through and do a quick edit on them. And then once I got home, I transferred them to my desktop computer to do a final edit on them. I took a tripod, yes. No, just a tripod. I used a tripod for focus stacking and for the hummingbirds, and also for the long exposures for the water flowing. A lot of the birds were handheld just because it was a challenge, on a tripod trying to do the birds that were, in different places. But now, what our guide had is he had a big tripod with a gimbal head on it, which is much better for that type of thing. It's much easier and faster to move around, do that. But I had my travel tripod, which is smaller and lighter. 2. I probably could have gotten by with just one, but it was nice having the ability to pull out a second camera for something. No, she's into birding though. So she went along because she felt that it would be good for the birding aspect of it. So like I say, she got 85 new birds on her list, and 15 of them were hummingbirds. So she was very happy. We sat yesterday for a couple of hours trying to go through and get names to all of these birds. So I could have made them up, but I thought some people would know better. Okay. Yeah. And she's my Sherpa. She helps carry the stuff. She'll carry my backpack or whatever. Just lucky, I guess. Okay. Well, thank you very much. Yeah, something else came up. Right there. Okay. Yeah, yeah, let's take a 5-10 minute break and then we'll do photo share. I did see as I was looking yesterday that Road Scholar also has grandparent trips. We took our grandson on a trip to Chincoteague this summer and he really enjoyed it. And they do have grandparent trips to Costa Rica. So we're thinking we may take him in a year or two. I don't know because he contracts out with Road Scholar. I don't know when he will be doing his next Road Scholar program. I don't know. But I could contact him in order to see. But I mean, every time I've been on a Road Scholar trip, the guides have been very good.
Yeah. And the government is finally this year.
Thank you. You're the. It gets all the picture flash, sorry. I just wanted to check this, is my second meeting, I sent you a bunch. And I just want to make sure. I'm saying about a certain, under a certain, size, I didn't. So they were okay.
Did you email this?
Yes. I think they would be press. I just bought a computer, lap, but I've never had an app. It's kind of a learning experience. You use one of them. But then you have to sit down. And, like, I don't remember getting one. For that email, you sent out a couple days ago. Didn't have my name across it, so I like asking by the data. I know that, I just want to make sure I see.
When we do photo share, I'm gonna send around so that we can hear you over on the recording. Okay.
Okay, we're gonna do photo share now. Okay, back to photo share now.
But it's still on record, but not over. So that we can hear the record.
Okay, this is a tulip I bought at the grocery store one day. It was already bloomed and looking nice. So I took photographs of it in different ways, and this one I had it with a white background. Then I decided to put a texture on it afterwards, which I thought made a nice look. So that was, yeah, it was post processing. Yeah. And next. This is a butterfly wing. I bought some butterflies. You can buy butterflies, basically preserved. And I took this photograph with my macro lens. I wanted to get a nice shot of some butterfly wings. I thought would be an interesting abstract. And so this was with my standard macro lens. So I was happy with that photograph. As close as I actually had extension tubes on to get as close as I could get with my macro lens. Now this one, this one is with a different lens. I bought a used discontinued Canon lens, which focuses from 1:1 to 5:1. So it only does macro and basically magnifications. So this was that butterfly wing at a 3x magnification. And so that lens, it's a 65 millimeter lens. It was, less than an inch away from the butterfly wing in order to do that. So I was trying that to see how it would work. And That was pretty cool. Now this is the reproductive parts of a African violet, also at 3 to 1. So I was really close with this one to get there. It's kind of interesting getting there. This was the anther of a tulip. Same thing, 3 to 1, pretty much almost filling the frame with just this very small anther of the tulip. So I'm going to experiment more with that lens. This was with just a regular macro shot, but this was, I picked up a flower, a cyclamen, and this was a bud that was just getting ready to open. And I just thought it was a really very nice minimalistic shot. Yeah, I used external lighting on it and a black background. And this was at the VMFA, went there a couple of times. And I like the staircases in the VMFA. I think they're very interesting, a lot of different angles and things, a lot of sense of motion to them. So, and I like this one in black and white. I thought it was a good look. Then, because I wasn't at the last meeting, I was in Arizona. And the one morning we took a drive down to the Whitewater Draw um, wildlife area. And it was nice. It was the mountains in the distance, and it was a nice scene. And we saw a lot of birds and ducks and things. I was really looking for sandhill cranes, which we had heard would be there, but they either flew out early that morning and were going to come back later in the afternoon. But we only saw a few of them off in the distance. These are a couple of northern shovelers we saw there. There were quite a bit, and it was a very calm morning, and we had a lot of reflections in the water. So it was very nice for that. And this is a green winged teal, I believe it is. Yeah, green winged teal. Had quite a few of those as well, swimming around. These were the sandhill cranes. They were coming in. They were pretty far off in the distance, though. But I got them with the mountains in the background. And then we went to the Saguaro National Park. There's 2 Saguaro National Parks in Tucson, one on the eastern side of Tucson and one on the western side. We went to the eastern one the one evening just before sunset. And when you get there, there's an 8-mile road that goes through the park and makes a loop. And they say it normally takes about 45 minutes because it's a 15-mile-an-hour speed limit. You can't really go much faster because it's pretty windy and hilly. It took us an hour and a half because we stopped a lot of times to take pictures, but we got there like 4:30 in the afternoon, and by 6 o'clock the sun was setting, and that's about when we left. And this was with the sun setting behind the cactus. And the moon was rising at the same time the sun was setting, so that made for some interesting shots as well. And then this was the sunset, looking back at Tucson because we were on the eastern side, so we were looking back at Tucson and with the sun setting over the city. And this was the morning we had in February where we had an ice storm that was gone by late afternoon. But I got out early and got a few shots in my yard. This was a this was a type of magnolia. It's a star magnolia that had ice on it, and now it's starting to bloom. And this was a rose that I had bought for my wife for Valentine's Day. Really, that's what I told her. And I sprayed some water on it and got a nice shot of it. And then these were out at Lewis Ginter. These are the apricots that were blossoming out there. And this was just last week. I have a helleborus that's blooming now. It's a very dark colored helleborus, but thought it looked pretty good. Okay. Leo? Here you go, Leo.
Uh, my wife and I took a trip to New Mexico in January. This cemetery on the side of the road as we were driving around. This is at Chaco Canyon. This is the Fajada Butte where the people who lived at Chaco Canyon would do their astronomical observations. Some of the what's left of the buildings at Chaco Canyon. It's a huge complex way out in the middle of nowhere. If you decide to go, leave an hour to get down the dirt road, which is like a washboard. There's one of the kivas. These are not ruins. These are still in use by many of the yes. It's in New Mexico. I'm sorry. Okay. Yes, it's these for their religious ceremonies. All of the Pueblo nations, the Navajo, the Hopi, they all come from the surrounding states to do their religious ceremonies here. So it's by no means ruins. It is in active use. This is the wall of the canyon behind or along which they would excavate from the walls. I'm not sure exactly what they did, but it was sure shiny and attracted my eye. Petroglyphs. There's a stretch of that canyon wall that's covered with these petroglyphs. More of the remains of the buildings. This is in Chimayo, which is in the up by the Jemez Mountains. There's a sanctuary there, but they don't allow photography. And this was on the other side of the road. This sanctuary, like the statue that they found somewhere back a couple hundred years ago, somebody found a crucifix buried in the ground. They built a sanctuary around it, but here you can, there's a little chapel over the site where they found the crucifix, and you can get, they have little garden shovels and you can get the dirt out, and the word is that it will heal you if you rub the dirt on you. I got some of the dirt, but I haven't rubbed it on anything yet. But this was right across the street from the sanctuary. This was the mesa right behind the place where we stayed in the Navajo reservation. At sunrise, and it was 0 out. This is a place just on the high desert, just to the west of Taos, where they have what they call earth ships. It's like all the leftovers from Haight-Ashbury and Woodstock. Grateful Dead followers, they've come there and they build these structures that are off the grid in terms of electric and comm and water. And the houses are made out of old tires with earth rammed in and covered with concrete. And they look like they were designed by Dr. Seuss. So it's kind of fun to go there and see that. This is an idea of what they build. They have greenhouses where there's allegedly growing their own food. I didn't see a lot there. It was January. They use the gray water to water the plants. And it's supposed to be self-sustaining. I don't know. I have my doubts, but they're having fun. And it's interesting to see. That's a wind turbine. They generate some power that way and with photovoltaic panels. There's another one of their experimental buildings, which they never quite completed because it doesn't really work in it. But it makes them happy. You can see the tires that are all rammed with earth. You bury tin cans in the concrete. I didn't really understand all of it. But it does look like this, the inside of that building. Pardon? Yeah. They're very artistic. There's the inside of that same building. It does look like a Dr. Seuss to me. Yeah, yes. Yes, these buildings were more or less where they would take you on the tours, but it was several hundred acres and you'd see these things dotted over it's just to the west of Taos. No, that's just I know it looks like an elephant, doesn't it? But it's not. This is the fellow who was the caretaker at the sanctuary at Chimayo. He's a pretty famous carver. He carves these Santos. He's got work in the Smithsonian. I didn't realize at the time how well known he was. We were just talking to him. I asked if I could take his picture, and he said, well, if it's just me, yeah, you can come and do it. So he's nice enough to let me get his picture. The mountains by Taos with this is in the Jemez Mountains. This was in Albuquerque. It's the National Museum of Atomic or Nuclear Technology and Science. Kind of a jocular approach to atomic weapons, but about 6, I think, not counting travel. This is a mock-up of the core of the nuclear weapon at Alamogordo for the Manhattan Project. The first Trinity atomic weapon, a mock-up, obviously. The real one's gone. And here's some, if you like hydrogen bombs, they have plenty of them. You can see what they actually look like. All kinds of rockets and weapons, and they're the engines from a B-52. So it's an interesting museum. This is a B-29, like the Enola Gay, with the tower that they used for the Trinity shot, the first atomic explosion and a mock-up of it. The Rio Grande Gorge Bridge just west of Taos. Very impressive. It's a big, you don't really see the gorge until you get right up on it. You know, it's a big flat plain, and then, wow, look at this thing. This is a hot spring up in the mountains. The smell of hydrogen sulfide will about knock you down. I don't, the people go and bathe in the hot springs and stuff. It's like, man, this is interesting, but I gotta get away from this. It smells horrible. This is the Valles de Caldera National Park. Again, up in the Jemez Mountain. This is the crater of an extinct volcano. That's up around 9,000 feet. And yeah, you can really tell you're high, your breathing is labored. Same area, just the other side of the road. This was on the Jemez Pueblo reservation. It's a rest stop on the side of the highway, and they have these beautiful sandstone cliffs. And of course, because it was noon, I couldn't get really good shots like you want to see of this red sandstone. But you know, you do what you can while you're there. Sandstone cliffs. And just one more, try to get a little closer up. And I think that's my last one. Yeah.
I was recently on a photo outing with another group. We went to a Beth Haba synagogue downtown, and this was on the stairway going up to the balcony, and the geometry of it attracted my eye. This was inside the synagogue, looking up at the ceiling. Again, this was going up the steps. I like the quietness of it. An ICM in the synagogue. This was a piece of a stained glass window it was just the bottom part of it, and I don't know what you call it. A triptych is 3. I don't know what you call it when it has 5. A 5-tick. I don't know. A multi-exposure. That's what it really looks like. That same icy day, I didn't get up as early. This was a early afternoon. Ice. More ice. And I got some flowers just yesterday, day before, and I decided to try and take some pictures of them on the kitchen table. My backdrop is my raincoat. I'm not equipped like Tom is. And that was a ICM. I put some of the flowers on the floor and did an ICM on them. I think that's it.
Here, where are you?
I'm doing movie title shots. Guess what this is? Airplane. 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 The good, the bad, and the ugly. Airplane. Airplane. And a second movie title, Touch of Blue. Touch of Blue. That's looking down on a vase. Touch of Blue. Touch of Blue. That's just a building around here. Touch of Blue. Touch of Blue. Richmond University Chapel. So keep sending those, keep looking at those movie titles if you.
I was just going through some old pictures, and my wife was with a group who were singing over in Paris, and so while they were rehearsing, I got a chance to wander around on my own, and took this picture of the courtyard in the Louvre. And this was a picture on the inside of that structure that protrudes from in the courtyard, but that's the bottom of it inside the Louvre. And this was a picture, you can hardly see it, but I was real excited to see the Mona Lisa. And of course, you can't really get close to it with a camera because everybody wants to see a picture. I was expecting some huge mural. And there's this little tiny thing. And so it's like, what was all the fuss about? But, you know, everybody, this is what everybody goes to see. And just hundreds of people there trying to get close, trying to get a picture with a cell phone or whatever. So I know, yeah. And then a few weeks ago, I was wandering around down on Browns Island, and it amazes me all the changes that are going on in Browns Island, and it just doesn't look like the same place that I remember from a few years ago. So I guess this is progress or change or whatever you want to call it. And also this is I walked across the Potterfield Bridge, and this is just looking back towards Browns Island. So I think that was the last one. Yeah.
And that is some from movie titles. This is from Governor's Antiques. It's The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Ugly dude here. And A Touch of Blue. This is Hard Rock Casino down near Miami. And these are someone else's.
right, well, this is my touch of blue. I've forgotten what the name of this bird is, but it's a flightless bird that I saw in a sanctuary in North Carolina. And I believe it lives naturally in South America. And then this is on the waterfront, just a pelican in the Outer Banks. And another on the waterfront, heron. I think that's all I've got, right? Yeah. Who's next? Okay.
All of these are on the waterfront. This is the Charles Bridge in Prague. Most of the people take pictures up at the top of the statues, but I was on a boat tour of the city, so I got one from down on the river. This is the confluence of the river Rhone and the Saône in Lyon, France. And I'm standing in the Museum of the Confluence, which is a very modernistic museum. It's a nice museum where the two rivers come together. This is the Grand Lagoon in Venice. This is a beach at La Jolla in California with all the seals and the sea lions laying on the beach. Just if you've never been close to those, they smell like a saltwater barnyard.
I've been there.
This is a cottage on Lake Como. Yeah, it's a small cottage on Lake Como. This is a view across the Jackie Onassis Reservoir in Central Park in New York. This is Pandapus Pond, just outside of Blacksburg. It's a recreation area that the land in the pond was donated by Mr. Pandapus, who was a very successful businessman in Blacksburg. But he had some second thoughts about this property. He said, that damn pond's the only thing I'm going to be remembered for. This is the shoe memorial on the Danube, and it's in Budapest. And it's a memorial to the Jews that were rounded up and killed along the river. They let the bodies fall in the river, but they made them take their shoes off first. People leave the flowers and stuff there. Well, it's part of the World War II thing it's a memorial in Budapest. So it is part of their remembrance of the Holocaust.
They were Hungarians who shot the Jews, the longer Germans. This is what I'm hearing in Mexico. We never found any lives walking away.
Yeah, there's 60 pairs of shoes that they have cast and placed along that wall. Of course, I only had a few of them in the picture, but they're very realistic looking shoes. This is just a skyline of the downtown Richmond from a few years ago. This is the bay at Valdez, Alaska. And this wasn't a really good camera that I took this picture with, but on the other side, if you zoomed in, you could see the southern end of the Alaskan pipeline. There's a bunch of oil storage tanks over there on the kind of up on the hill, and that's where they loaded the ships to take the oil out from Alaska. That it?
Within the room went out. So if you have any ideas, please let us know.
Some of these downloaded.
Thank you very much.
Some of the ones that were downloaded. Yeah.